If you find yourself divorced or single and wondering whether or not you can rediscover love in midlife, then today you're in for a treat. On today's episode, I'm joined by Heidi Friedman, a divorced mother of two who found herself in the middle of midlife wondering, hey, does true love even exist? So determined to find the answer, she immersed herself in research and dating 104 different dates over a 10-year span. And let me tell you, that turned into a book. She's the author of Love Lessons, 104 Dates and Stories that led her to true love. And so we're going to jump into her journey today and find out all the things you ever wanted to know about finding true love in midlife. Heidi, welcome to This Empty Nest Life.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here and to join you and your listeners to chat about love lessons.
So we were talking a little bit beforehand about there are different components to love life, as the kids grow. But I wouldn't be a good host if I didn't ask this first question. You said 104 dates in 10 years. Seriously, 104 dates?
Seriously, 104 days, not 104 guys. It was about
people will be wondering that question.
Guys.
104 different people. How's that even possible?
Yes, it is the number one question I get. So there was 3 or 4 guys who I dated for some period of time. My youngest son taught me the term situationship, which is like, definitely not equivalent to a relationship, which none of them really were. But I did count those dates.
Yeah, situationships. Well. That's, I think, a new term for folks, especially, our age, like Gen Xers and people who are in midlife and maybe empty nesting. I know some of the younger coaches out there who deal in relationships, all they talk about is situationships.
Right. Exactly. So I'm learning as I go here.
Well, hopefully not now. Now you're remarried, right? Yeah. So hopefully that time in life is
we just had our 10-year anniversary, so all is good.
Right. So tell me about the book itself. Like, it's a really intriguing title for me and for my listeners who it's like, okay, they find themselves in midlife, maybe never married or having had like this, what they thought was a great marriage. And then the kids go off to college. And then I've talked about it on the show before. Great divorce happens and people are kind of like blindsided. And boom, they find themselves wondering, ooh, is this it? So is it? Clearly it's not. But tell me about your journey.
It's not. And I just had a friend go through literally exactly as you described. And she read the book and she was really said I gave her hope, which is all I'm trying to do. Spread some love and give some hope. So the book actually was born around my 40th birthday because I had woken up on my 40th birthday and I had been divorced for several years and had decided, okay, I don't know why, but I don't think I have ever been truly in love, which you can judge me. I was married, but it was a different situation, not that sort of partnership, deep, true love that where you're totally madly in love with someone. And so I started interviewing friends who I thought had what I saw as, idyllic marriages, or at least they like really loved each other, and my questions were, how did you know it was your person? How does he or she keep you happy? What is the best part of your relationship? All of the things. I never talked to a couple together. I always talked to the husband and wife individually if I talked to both of them, because I only spoke to people who I had pretty significant relationships with, because I was really looking for people that I thought had figured it out. And so I'm an attorney by day, and I was traveling all over the country at the time doing depositions, and on planes, I would look at my notes from my meetings, and I realized after some time that it was the same themes were popping up over and over again. And I wrote about 8 chapters with some of those themes, and then I parked it because I had got to the point actually that I kept hearing the same things over and over. And I sort of was like, okay, well, I figured it out. So now I know what kind of these themes are, and I continued to date. And then I actually forgot about the book. I met my husband in 2013. And then I had found the book maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, wow, it'd be really interesting to think about my current relationship, how it applies to these themes, think more about my dates and just my journey. And I honestly wrote the book 1000% for our 4 kids. I have 2 kids and 2 kids that I've birthed and 2 bonus children, all of which are adulting at different levels from ages 22 to almost 29 now. But I have seen some of them in what I would call not the best choice relationships. And I really wanted them to learn from my mistakes and not settle. So that was how the book was born, and really the reason why I ended up writing
I
it
love
after
that
all
so
those
much.
years.
For people who are listening, we talked about finding love in midlife, and they're like, "Oh, but that was, you were in your late 30s as opposed to being in your 50s." But I feel like everything we're going to talk about today applies no matter where you are in what stage of life. You could pull something from today's conversation and from your book.
1000%. I mean, the best part of the book for me, I have, connect with me at the end. And I have gotten emails from super random people, even married couples, who said that they used it as a tool to kind of remonitor and reevaluate their current relationship, and they found it super helpful. And I've definitely have done a bunch of book signings, and I've met a lot of especially women who are in midlife or even a little bit beyond. I just had a 70-year-old reach out to me who's dating again for the first time. So there's hope for all of us. And it's just a matter of putting yourself out there in various different ways. And I think everyone can find love
I
again
love
if they
that.
really
Yeah,
want to.
you mentioned your son talked about situationships, but younger
Mhm.
folks talk about red flag, green flags, and yellow flags in their relationship. Have you learned about those too? And did you find those in your journey of these 104 dates?
There was only the red flag concept back in my day. These other flags are sort of new to me. I definitely had a lot of red flag dates. I think the number one question I get is, what was your worst, craziest date? And there were so many that it's actually hard to pick. I think what happened is when I started my journey, I was not very confident personally, but I was confident professionally. And I kind of grew over this 10-year process into someone who is much more confident, much more able to tune up my gut and find the red flags, and therefore look for the waving green flag at the end of the day, which are
Yeah,
sometimes
that
hard
is
to
true.
find.
That is true. I would imagine as part of your journey, you worked a lot on yourself first. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I talk a lot about therapy. I'm a huge fan. I've made my children huge fans. I think I had a lot to unpack, and I learned a lot through the process. And I truly do believe that each relationship, even if it doesn't work out, teaches you something that you can take with you on to the next relationship. And you just sort of have to figure out what it is. And sometimes when you're knee deep in it, you can't see it. But when you get some space from it, you look backwards, then I think it comes to life and tells you what that lesson is that you can carry on as you kind of move towards what maybe and hopefully would be your sort of true love or your
Yeah. Okay.
person.
Let's say you work on yourself a little bit, and then how do you or how
Mhm.
does someone date with confidence? What does that even look like?
It's hard. I will be honest with you. First of all, I think you have to have an open heart and be ready to date. I did a book thing last week, and I had someone come up and ask a question, and she's still trying to get out of an old relationship but also doing all these things. And I basically said, until that chapter is closed, you're not going to have this open heart and open vibe. And I actually, as much as I also hate the apps, I love the apps because I think it's a safe way to put yourself out there as long as you have low expectations. My 22-year-old will tell you the apps are just, you make him crazy, and he has a love-hate relationship with them. And I think those kids that age have a different dating philosophy. But I think for older folks in our middle age and above, that it allows you to safely, you can do due diligence. You can Google people, look at social media, make sure they're not serial killers or bankrupt or whatever you want to check. And you can email back and forth till you get comfortable. And then you just go with like, maybe I'm making a new friend. This is not going to be the love of my life, but it just gives you practice. Like I always say, would you go into your dream job interview without doing prep work and prep interviews? And so I look a little bit at online dating, and people have met their significant other. So I'm not poo-pooing it if it happens. But I think if you go into it more as a training type thing, it works. And then I also think you just have to tell everyone you know. And I don't mean like your little circle of friends, because that's your circle. You have to grow that
Mm,
bigger and wider. I'm a huge hot yoga fan. And it kept me sane through being a single mom and a divorce and stuff. And I'm in the front row always because I'm a type A, have to stare at the wall to like be focused kind of person. And I was next to the same three people all the time on the weekends. And we became friendly. And rushing ahead to the end of the punchline, one of those people who I hardly knew and basically took a couple of years to even say hello to fixed me up with my husband, who she didn't even know that well, but she worked with him and just thought of me every time she was with him. And she has wonderful intuition, and she definitely did a better job fixing up than many people. I had some bad fix-ups, but it was about, telling people outside your circle, like through running club or yoga club or pickleball or whatever people do these days,
I love
that
that.
you're
So like
interested.
from hot mess to hot yoga to hot love, right? Like that's
Yeah, exactly. It was a transition.
yeah. What was the biggest
Exactly.
transition for you on that journey?
That's an interesting question. I honestly think that after a while of being single and being a single mom, I'm a super independent person, anyways. I've always been able to support myself. I was one of the lucky people when, the choice to divorce was mine. I was able to support myself and my children. So it was much easier. And I have extensive sympathy for women who are not in
Mhm,
that
mhm.
same situation. And I help and talk to those women quite often. You can imagine after so many years, you kind of develop this lifestyle and independence that I almost thought I'm never going to be able to fit somebody into this equation anymore because I got so used to and comfortable kind of being alone. I had definitely decided that I will be alone before be with the wrong person, even though I kept trying. So I think like figuring out how to integrate someone into my life, although Will made it very easy. He's my husband. And then, of course, one of the things to think about is at the time he had two boys he was still caring for and the primary person for, and we had to integrate these kids, and that transition was really hard. We were much slower with that than we were introducing him to my kids, although I in my 10 years of dating, he was the only person I introduced my kids to. So I'm a huge believer in it's not a play date, I think I say in the book. And at the time, my little guy was 10 or something, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I just knew he would be like, a magnet
Mhm.
or glue to whatever guy was in his life. And so I was really careful about it. But that was a really tough transition and I would never give up our now like extended, beautiful little combined family, but
Yeah, for
it
those
took
people who
work.
may be going through that, let's dig into that a little bit more. The work piece of finding true love
Sure.
when it is a blended family.
It is sensitive. It's hard. Someone told me, it might have even been the kid's therapist, that it on average takes 7 years for a blended family to feel like a real family. I think we were overachievers, not to brag, but it was a beautiful thing. I mean, my youngest, who's 22, is besties with Will's oldest, like literally talk every day, but they're also like both obsessed with basketball and, certain Family Guy and certain things that they're very interested in. But we were super careful. Like when we came together physically into the same house, which was about a year after we were together and a year before we got married, we made sure each kid had his or her own space with a bathroom and a bedroom so that no one was on top of each other. We tried to treat everybody equal. It was a unique situation for us because we're both the
Mm.
primary parent for the children. And so we had all the kids with us all of the time. So I think in a lot of relationships, you have time as a couple or back and forth. And so we didn't have that. I went from being a mom of two to, being a bonus mom to two others who like, and at this point, I mean, my stepsons are my everything. I can't even imagine them not in my life, but I think you do have to give them time. It took one of the boys longer than the other one to kind of embrace me. And I think you just need to push, especially if there is another parent in the picture, that I'm not here to replace that parent. I'm just, my true philosophy is you can never have enough people that love you. And especially nowadays. So I kind of feel like the more people that love you, the better. And so, just trying to get that point across and eventually, we got there. And now I feel like we were all in Mexico for Thanksgiving. And I was like just looking around our table thinking like, I just love this family that we built, which is
Yeah,
something
that's
that's really
awesome. I
special.
love how it came together, and that might not happen for everybody. So, a little disclaimer for people who are going through this,
Right.
right? It doesn't always work this way, but you also have to work at
Right.
it to make it work.
100%. There was again lots of therapists involved, and some mess ups. I was trying to think of the right word. I didn't want to swear, but some things that like didn't go as we hoped. But I'd also say like, which I talked to a lot of women about, I do think if you have adult children, like truly, if I met Will now and everyone's out of the house, I actually think as much as you want everyone to come together, it's harder actually because our kids growing up in the same house, even if it was only for 5 or 7 years, made a huge difference. And I think it becomes a little bit less important to be completely integrated as you get a little bit older and your kids are, it's lovely. And hopefully your kids want you to be happy and welcome whoever your new significant other is. But I do think at a certain point, it becomes less relevant than
Yeah,
when
for
the kids
sure.
are
And a
younger.
little bit probably more ingrained into like, ooh, they're not really a part of my life because
Right.
I'm an adult and I've got this going on over here.
Right.
What's one thing you
Exactly.
learned about yourself through this journey?
I learned that I actually like having somebody take care of me. and this is I say this because again, more therapy. When I was going through my first divorce, my only divorce, but with my first husband, we went to a therapist to sort of, basically make sure this was the right choice, even though I knew in my gut that it was. And he did all this testing. He was actually an excellent therapist, but he basically said, yes, you two should get divorced, which is funny. But anyways, but he told me afterwards, because you meet with him individually, is like, I'm not sure. I know what you're looking for in your life, this true partner. I'm not sure you'll ever let anyone in enough to be able to like take care of you like you're saying. And that just stuck with me. I mean, it was so many years ago. And it's the most beautiful. We take care of each other. There's, I have an analogy in the book where like one of the themes is that really strong couples take care of each other. And like the analogy is when there's waves, like if someone goes under, someone pulls up, and you can't always be the puller upper. You have to take turns pulling each other up, because if not, you're going to either be exhausted or drown, basically. So we have this wonderful balance of supporting and pulling each other up. I give up like free control to him because I trust him so inherently. And so that was probably my biggest revelation, that I
Yeah.
was capable
And
of
what a
that.
revelation that was, to be like thinking perhaps maybe you could never
Mhm.
fully give of yourself to someone to take care of you, to be all the way like 180-degree turn to say, oh my goodness, yeah, it is amazing to have someone care for you in the way that you deserve to be cared for.
Totally. Totally. I'm always is sort of the caretaker. So it's such a nice feeling to have that. And so that was a journey to get there
Yeah.
for sure.
What's a funny story along this journey? I'm sure people want to know that too.
All right, I'll give you one funny. I have several of them. I actually have many of them, but one of the funniest ones is I was actually a Match.com date. Back in the day, it was sort of like Match.com, eHarmony, and like J-Day, but that J-Day was just terrible. As a Jewish woman, I was like, oh God, if this is all that's out there here, we're in trouble. And I found this guy on Match, and we had been emailing, and it seemed fine. We were meeting at a bar for a drink. I always tried to like make a date, short, like not a first date, like not a whole dinner, not like, some kind of, short thing, whether it's coffee or a drink or whatever. It was easier at the time for me to have like some alcohol as I was continuing to try to move past this. But I show up, he doesn't look anything like his picture. Like literally, he had hair in his picture. He was completely bald. He was wearing some random turtleneck, something. I don't know. That's all I remember. But we were there for 5 minutes, and he pulls out what's called a cease and desist order, and that he had gotten it from Pepsi or Coke or something like that, because he was selling stuff out of his garage. And so he wanted me to look at it as a lawyer and give him legal advice. And this is the time where you're like, oh my God, thank God I have young children. And I was like, oh my God, my daughter's calling. And I think I was in and out of there in 8 minutes and like running to my car. it was like, just one of those things that went so badly. And part of it was just, he wanted like some expertise rather than had any interest in me, but just generally. And then he texted me and asked me to go out again. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm good. We're good. We're good.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
like
going to happen.
legal aid turns into like legal date, right? Like
Exactly.
so for the people who are wondering out there, is like you have found true love. Have you, in the course of your research or talking to other people, is it like, have you found folks doing the same thing in midlife, like finding their person?
Absolutely. I have a couple of friends who are on a second marriage, some of who I interviewed the book, some of who I have not. And they have definitely found their person who they say was more of their person than in the first marriage. Because I also feel like, who I am at 45 is very different than who I am at 28
Absolutely.
or whatever. And that's why I'm also telling my kids to like, take your time. You do not have to get married by the time you're 30. Like, let's figure out who you are and what you want and all the things. So, but yeah, and I will say the vast majority of people that I interviewed for the book the first time, I think only one of them's gotten divorced since I interviewed them. And those are there's some serious longevity in those marriages. But I've sort of become like, I think when you're like the first person divorced, and I'm a lawyer anyways, I talk to a lot of women who get divorced, and they might be 30, 40, 50, 70. I talked to someone 70 last week. It just depends. But I help them try to understand, you're at the bottom of this hill and you're going to get over it. And it's so beautiful on the other side and all of the things. But you also want to get hope that they're going to be able to find love again if that's something that they are interested in. And so I think I'm a symbol of that for a lot of people, which I really appreciate, because I always say everyone needs a will, which is my husband's name. And they should all have
That's
a will in their
awesome.
life.
Everybody should have a will. Wait, not that type of will. This type of will. Yeah, this kind of will. That
This
makes
kind of
perfect
will,
sense.
exactly.
What throughout this
Exactly.
journey, other than finding will, what was a defining moment for you?
I think that I originally, right when I got divorced, I started dating somebody, and it was symbolic of some of my bad choices. He turned out to have like a drinking problem, and it was somebody that I think I did meet him online, actually. I only dated like two people that I had met online, but I met him online. And he was a lawyer, and we definitely clicked. There was like chemistry. It was like one of those things. But I found myself overlooking these bright red flags. And like, I even found out later that he had told me he was divorced, but he was really only separated. And so, I was strong enough to like end that and walk away pretty freaking quickly, like compared to before. But I definitely felt that was a defining moment. I'm not going to just find somebody, even if there's chemistry there, if the other pieces of the puzzle are not there for me. And I know what I need now, and I need to be careful to not go down that bad road again. And so that was really a defining moment. That was probably like a year into, maybe two into being divorced, and I was like, okay,
Right.
this is
Yeah. So
not
where
right.
my coach brain goes for my listeners is you needed to work on yourself first before you could figure out what you wanted. You just hopped right back into the pool of what wasn't working.
Exactly. And then I also realized I need some sort of perspective. I definitely took, over the 10 years, I took lots of breaks from dating. There was many times where I'm like, I'm not dating anybody for 6 months. I'm just focusing on me and my kids. And I had busy times at work when I was traveling a lot and all of that. And I kind of took breaks from the process. And I would say the other defining moments were me, for example, my oldest was bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah ages. We were kind of in the whole thing. So I had to constantly go to these things by myself. I would never bring a date with me with my kids anyways, but even without my kids, like to work thing, just, it was like too stressful to me. And I never was really in a relationship where like it had reached the level of, okay, we can do this. And so like showing up alone all the time and like being the odd person out really made me kind of assess my life, but also realize like, okay, I'm my own best date and I can do this. And I had lots of hysterical dating stories to share at cocktail hour. So I was very entertaining. And, I found that every time I did it, it got a little bit easier.
You just said a nugget in there, which I want people to like go back and hear, is I was my own best date And I think that's how you become the best version of yourself for other people, is to become your own
Mhm.
best date. And then you can figure out how other people fit into that.
Exactly. Exactly. I wanted to be, I did feel like when I met Will that I had become the best version of myself by that time. I'm still learning and growing. I actually think he makes me, one of the things I say in the book is he makes me a better person. Like he's such a good person and he's expanded me culturally and like with arts and all kinds of stuff that I feel like, makes me a better person. He was so encouraging to write this book or whatever it is that I want to do in my life. He very much supports me and I see him always doing well and doing good and all of that. And it makes me want to as well. So it's fun to grow
Yeah, so
together
it's
now.
interesting that you bring that up. I was just searching for a note that I wrote for my daughter. I was watching a movie, right? All the good things come from movies. It was about finding the right person. And there were 4 questions to
Mm-hmm.
ask. Is he kind or is she kind? Can you tell him everything in your heart? Does he help you become the best version of yourself? And then the final one is, can you imagine him as a father
Love.
of your kids? But that plays out too if you're a blended family,
Yeah.
like a, a supporter of your kids,
Oh,
let's say. But I thought those are
I love
amazing
those
4
questions. Those are
questions.
fabulous.
And so my
Yeah.
daughter's 25, my son's 27. But I was like, oh, I'm writing those down and tucking those away for later. I don't think she listens to the show. She's not going to hear those now.
Well,
There
tell
you
her she's
go.
got to read my book because it
Yeah, I
jives with my book
totally
very
will.
well.
I totally will.
I'm actually surprised about how many of my friends, we all sort of have I have tons of friends who have the kids the same age as our kids. And so many of them have bought the book for their kids. And I've heard from so many of the kids. And because I think they hear my kids talk about how they've learned so much from the process and things like that. A friend of mine uses this term Noah's Ark theory, which is kind of the thought that in our world, everyone feels like you have to be matched up and paired up. And so you kind of have this inclination like it's better to have someone in my life rather than to be alone. And what I'm trying to tell my kids is, first of all, you're not ready to be a partner until you're your best version of yourself. Like for Valentine's Day this year, I sent them all $100, all 4 of them. And I said, take yourself out to do something yourself and focus on yourself for at least an hour because you are your best Valentine and you're not going to be able to be a Valentine to someone else until you do that. And so they're all excited about the money, of course, but still, I think they got the message. And so the goal is like for the kids to understand that they don't need to fall into this, I need a partner, I need a date, I need whatever. They need to focus on themselves, put your mirror on yourself, and then we can go towards that once we're
I
ready to
think
be
that's
there.
such a great point, Heidi. I nail that into my daughter's brain too. Is like you don't need somebody else to complete you. You
Right.
complete yourself first. And then you find somebody who complements you. Doesn't complete you, complements
Oh, I
you.
like
Yeah.
that too. We'll have to
There you
alter the
go.
Jerry
You
Maguire.
compliment me instead of you complete me. Yeah. We're going to have him rewrite it. We're going on vacation
Exactly.
together, my wife and I and my daughter. Her son is not a beach guy, so he's like, nope, I'm out. But I'm going to get that book and bring it for the beach so she has something to read. And I'm like, listen to this podcast episode first, and then I've got something.
Perfect. And it's been fun. Like I started a podcast with my 22-year-old and he's done podcasts before, but we're calling it I Love You More. It's available on Spotify and Apple. And we're talking about all things dating, relationships, and love generationally. And I will be honest that it's brought me more joy than anything I've ever done in my life, just having these super in-depth conversations with Zach. But at the same time, I have learned so much. And just how, the way these kids will approach people on Tinder or Hinge, but not walk up to them at a bar. I mean, and it's just how swipings almost can be a game sometimes. And it's just it's just I've learned a million things, but it's just been this interesting journey and I am learning a lot. And I think that modern love and modern dating for our kids looks different. And I actually am like promoting to my 4, like, let's date in the wild, people. Like, let's delete the apps and let's put yourself out there and do things because maybe meeting people will actually be good for you, like in real time.
Exactly.
So we'll
Forget
see
the
what
swipe
happens.
left and swipe right. How about just, be right in front of somebody instead? Yeah. I love that. So I do have some
Exactly.
younger listeners who listen to the show. I'm just curious, what are the main differences that you and your son talk about on that show?
Sure. We have a whopping 4 episodes so far. We just started it and he's graduating next week. So it's a little bit on hold for a minute. But, the main difference is literally, I would definitely say the technology. And I would just say the number of apps and how they're formatted. And we just talked a lot, like what you have to put in and how people are trying to cultivate a vibe rather than authenticity. And we've talked a lot about the fact that being authentic is really the foundation for a strong relationship. So in my head, meeting somebody online like that when you're not being your true self is very challenging from like a foundational standpoint. And, he definitely agreed with that. We talked a lot about fix ups, I think last episode and that. And, they're not remotely
No.
into that whole thing. I mean, but he's 22 and even my 25, 27, they've never really been fixed up. I said, I think I asked him last time, would you let me fix you up? And he's like, he's like, maybe. I do think that they might want to trust like people in their lives to maybe fix them up at work or in other places and see how that goes. I do sense though that there is this kind of burgeoning joining and like turning away from the apps, and I think that hopefully leaving college will change that, at least for like my baby and hopefully for others. And so and it's also, I think there's a lot of learning that they're trying to do. Like Zach was basically explaining, like, I'm 22. I'm not the best version of myself. He's a super self-aware kid. And he was saying that I know I'm not ready to be in a relationship. I know I've made wrong choices. And so I feel like even if I dated somebody now, it wouldn't be my person forever. And so I might, when I'm ready for that, I might approach it differently than I do now, which makes,
Yeah, yeah.
total
And I think
sense.
too, it's probably a little bit different for folks, the younger kids, right? Like for us, it was like you met people
Right.
through your circle of friends, which is small, or at a bar,
Right.
right? The kids
Right.
are like,
It's so true.
they like,
Yes.
even alcohol is less of a thing now, right? Going out to bars isn't as much of a
Yeah,
thing.
100%.
Remote work plays into that, right? The community piece
Yeah,
is
that's a
huge.
huge, I
Yeah.
didn't think about that.
And
That's a
so
really big point.
they have to turn to the apps, but at the best solution. I think
Yeah.
it's part and parcel of everything. A little bit of both. It's like a really good recipe. The apps, meeting people,
Yeah.
going out there and just talking to anybody, those types of things. So I think that's how you find
Agreed.
after 104 dates true love, right? It's like doing a little bit of everything.
Exactly. That's what I say. I mean, you really have to kind of go all in. And I think, do the apps. I did like a lunch date service. I did like Jewish speed dating one day, which that was also a very funny, terrible story. I did all the things. Like I really was, and I'm super interested in like matchmakers and things like that because one of my goals is to like interview and talk to more matchmakers because I think that that's such an interesting concept. Like my friend Anne has this amazing intuition, but I feel like you really have to have intuition because when you're a matchmaker, your pool is only as good as the people that are in it. So if you're trying to just match up people because they're in your pool, that's not as good as if you like, I recently set somebody up because it was sort of a similar situation. They're both in New York and every time I see him, I think of her, which is like weird. And so they haven't gone out yet, but we'll see what happens.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Before I let you go, Heidi, the one question I always love to ask folks is, what is your empty nest or what is your life motto? And perhaps coming out of this whole journey, what's a couple of word sentence that's like, this defines my life in this moment?
That's a tough, interesting question. So one of my favorite life life sayings, I don't know why I couldn't think of the word, is actually comparison
Love
is the
it.
thief of joy. And I will say that my journey taught me that. And I still am working on it. It's not something, especially as an empty nester, you can see kids getting jobs and being successful while yours are struggling. and you really can keep you up at night in not good ways. And I am constantly reminding myself that comparison is the thief, is the thief of joy. And I tell my kids. And so social media makes that hard. And then the other thing that kept me going is someone bought me like a little poster when I got divorced that said, when the caterpillar thought life was over, she became a butterfly. And I still have like a little cutout of it that I keep next to my desk. And I think it's just, that's about hope. And the whole reason that I am going around talking about this book, I mean, I have a very successful legal career. I love my day job, but I feel like we're in a time where spreading love and hope is just so important. And if I can just give one person hope that they may find their person, then
I love
I'll
that.
feel
That's
really good about
a
it.
great way to finish the episode. Here she is, folks. Heidi Friedman, helping people with hope of finding their true love. And if you want it, the book Love Lessons, 104 Dates and Stories That Led Me to True Love is available on Amazon.com right now. Check it out. Put it in the show notes for folks. Heidi, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. And I'm going to remember those 4 questions. I love those 4 questions.
Awesome.
That's perfection. Tell your daughter she needs to listen to you.
I don't know, but we'll see.
You're planting seeds. You're planting
That's right.
seeds. They'll grow. I promise.